I'd like to welcome you to a conversation with a Mitchell area musician who has an enviable record in band work and in choir work in our community. This is Harry Garnet Adams. And Harry was born a long, long time ago on a farm just outside of Mitchell. Harry, would you tell us, please, your birth date and a little bit about your family?
Well, I was born in 1926, October the 15th, and I remember that much. And then I grew up with a family with two older sisters and three younger brothers, and stayed on the farm. Still there.
Would you say that your family was musical, first of all?
Yeah, they all played some kind of music, yeah.
And your mom played?
She played the keyboard, and the organ, and the piano, and quite well. And my dad played in the band for about 6 years, before he got married, back in the early 1900s, 1916, 17, 18, there somewhere.
And you went to school, obviously, since most of us did. And where did you go to school?
I went to Mitchell Public School. I lived in the country. At that time, my dad owned property in Mitchell, and then he paid tax in Mitchell, so we went to my
Mitchell Public School, then?
Public School, yeah.
And I don't think they had grade 8 at that time.
No, I just went to grade 7.
You just went to grade 7. How old were you when you left school?
12 years old.
Did music always play a big part in your childhood?
Well, I remember sitting around my mother once in a while, and it was singing a bit like a bunch of silly boys would do, and do that kind of stuff. And I was, of course, I sang in the church choir and the junior choir for about 3 or 4 years, and joined the senior choir. And yeah, my older sister was a pretty good piano player. And Darryl, my brother, was a harmonica, fiddled a bit, and things like that.
How did it come about that you started to play a cornet?
Well, I used to quit school when I was 12 years old, I said, and my dad thought I should be doing something else, but I just stayed home and working all the time, so he knew the bandmaster in Mitchell, because he played with him 30 or 40 years ago, before that, and he contacted him, and we had this cornet upstairs hid away underneath the bed somewhere. Nobody was ever allowed to touch it, so it's there for 30 years. He decided to get it out and have me play it. So I took a couple of lessons from George Ronenberg, give me a book to read on, and that's the way I got started.
Now, what was the name of that book that you learned how to play from?
It was a beginner with an Imperial. I forget what the name of it was. It was a green book, anyway, a starter book. It shows you the scales and what fingers to press down to make the right noise.
Well, getting into the mechanics of playing an instrument such as the cornet with 3 valves is a separate video all by itself, so I'm not going to get into that now, but I understand that you still have that cornet that you started in the band with.
I do.
Yes, and you proudly can take it out now and show us a truly old cornet.
I'll do that.
This cornet originally belonged to someone that you don't know about, but how it got into your family was a little bit of a story. I understand it was your grandfather who first purchased this instrument from its original owner.
That's right. That's the story I heard. That's all I know about it.
And some research has been done on this instrument, everyone. And the serial number says that this instrument was produced in about 1877. So you're looking at an instrument here that's been around for 138 years. I'll just add the mouthpiece because, as Harry will tell you, it's difficult to play an instrument without a mouthpiece. And we're not going to play it for you today, but you should be aware of the fact that this still is a playable instrument. I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that it has that beautiful engraving on what we call the bell. And that engraving is something that you just don't see on today's modern band instruments. We're going to put it on this stand so it can be sort of a focal point for us, Harry. And this instrument, if it could tell its story, would certainly keep us enthralled for a long, long time. When you started in the Mitchell Citizens Band, about what year would that have been?
Well, I started playing pretty well next spring. In the spring, like I started playing. I started practicing in 1938 in the fall after I quit school, and I started playing this ever since then.
1938. I can't help but realize that you were playing in the Mitchell Citizens Band before I was even born. Isn't that a record? By my calculations, you've been playing at whatever version of the Mitchell Town Band came along for over 76 years. That's one of the reasons why I really feel that we have to get your story preserved for posterity. I remember the first period band book. Do you remember some of the names of the other people from the band? You've already mentioned the current leader, who was George Runnenberg. Who were some of the other people that you have memories of in that band when you began?
With Cornish, he played the clarinet, and that was very unusual for a clarinet to be in a brass band back in them days. And there was Manny Walters, another man, a gentleman I played with when I was a young fella, and Art Walters, his nephew, played in the band at that time too. And I think Charlie Getke and Earl and Getke played way back in them days. I can't just think of any more right offhand right now, but I think.
Was Cliff Bushland around then?
Cliff Bush wasn't in town then yet.
Cliff came later then.
Came later, yeah.
I remember joining the band, and I remember going to all the rehearsals, but I don't think anything excited me as much as my very first public appearance in the band. I understand that your first public appearance with the Mitchell Citizens Band, Harry, was in a parade. Tell us how excited you were.
I was all excited about going to this parade and had the cornet all in my case, and I took the horn out, left the case in wherever we started from, and I got ready to play. There was no mouthpiece in it. so he said, well, you march in and pretend you're playing. I thought everybody was watching me, but I don't think they were. So first parade I was on, I had no mouthpiece.
Mitchell has been fortunate enough to have a local band since as early as 1872, when our old newspaper records indicate that the Mitchell Citizens Band took an award as the best band in this area, and that was a long time ago in 1872. Bands have a tendency to have their good times and they have their bad times. And I'm sure that through the years that has proven true as well with the Mitchell bands. However, Harry, you were there in 1938. Where did the Mitchell Citizens Band practice at that time?
They practiced in the old town hall, and up in the back room there was a big old box stove. They stuffed it full of wood and we had a nice and warm sitting around the fire. That's where we practiced in there. That was downstairs on the ground level.
In 1938, you began. It wasn't too long after that that things began to heat up politically and militarily in Europe. Did the outbreak of World War II have any effect whatsoever on the Mitchell Citizens Band?
Yes, it did. It took some of the men that were in the right age for the right age group for to join the armed forces, and so we lost quite a few members at that time. And
did the band carry on through World War II right till its end then?
we went on through World War II, and we used to get help from the Broadhagen band. They come in on a Thursday night. We always played concert on a Thursday all through summer in the Senate F on the grandstand, on the bandstand, and some of the members would come in and help us out, and we go back and help them out. And so that was it went on through the war.
That cenotaph that we have now uptown, that actually was where the old bandstand was located in town, wasn't it?
That's right, in the northeast corner, it would be, of that square there. Mm-hmm.
What do you remember of the concerts that were held in that bandstand? For instance, I think you had mentioned at one point that people would sometimes come up, park their cars, go home, and then come back for the concert.
That's quite true. When we get down the ready to play, there'll be cars sitting all over the place, but nobody in them. We'll get just people starting to come to and sit in their cars, and the people who come late had to stay back a little farther. Couldn't hear it quite as well, maybe. Although a brass band, you can hear quite a ways away.
Did you get good crowds for the concerts?
Oh yes, big crowds. And after every song, they blow the horns, and that was the way they applauded back in them days.
I seem to remember as well that at the concerts, people always had some idea of what you were going to play for that particular concert, because they used to publish beforehand in the Advocate the concert list.
Yeah, I kind of forgot that part of it. I think I did hear somebody say that too, yes. They played a lot of marches and overtures back in them days, and waltzes.
Hardly the kind of thing that our young people today would be very interested in.
Not really, that's right, yeah. They wouldn't be too interested in that.
Although waltzes and marches and overtures and things like that were our bread and butter back in those days, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Who was your first band conductor?
George Ronenberg.
And I know he didn't stay forever. Who was next? Do you remember?
Well, when he retired, when the band folded up shortly after the war, Frank Strathern was our next band leader. From Stratford, he led the CNR band in Stratford, and they hired him to come up and lead our band for a few years.
So for a little while he was leading two bands then.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You had told me earlier that the band folded right after World War II ended, so that would have been about 1946 or so. Mm-hmm. Who was responsible for starting the bands up again?
A man by the name of Alvin Jordan. He was the clerk treasurer of Mitchell at that time, and he got the idea that there was the band instruments at that time were stored up in an old band room way up in the town hall. He thought that they should get these band instruments playing, so he approached the Legion, the Mitchell Legion, and they took it over, and early sometime in whenever that was.
Yeah, I think the local Legion branch, 128.
Oh, I was after that.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Took the band over officially in 1961.
That's right. This is the town took it over again. The town took it over again for for a few years in the 50s. And then it went for about 6-7 years, and then it was, I mean, not that long, and then it disbanded again in about 1957 or there.
I remember when I was in high school, which would have been about 1957, 1958, here at Mitchell District High School, that we used to rehearse on the stage in the newly built high school. Is that where you had your rehearsals then, or did you still use the town hall?
Must have been after that. As long as the town had it, we practiced in the town hall, I think.
Who was responsible, or who was the main person or persons who were instrumental in having the band taken over by the Legion?
Carl Homuth, Bert Homuth was his nickname. He was one of the main instigators, and a gentleman who played in the band was Lloyd Pop Paul. He was another one. I think the two of them went to the town and see if they give them these instruments, and they see if they would try to get a band going in Mitchell under the name of the Mitchell Legion Band. So that's, as far as I know, that's how it got started.
And of course the town agreed, and the Legion, I should add at this point as well, were really desirous of having a band available because of Remembrance Day parades, because if there wasn't a band, it was pretty hard to march down the street to the cenotaph. So it was a natural mix, wasn't it?
Right, yeah.
I have a jewel here. This is a painting that was made by Liz Morello at that time, now Liz J. And we've looked at this painting. We think it's probably sometime in the 70s. Harry, what do you remember about receiving this painting?
Well, what I remember most about it, she got done the painting of me, and then she entered in the competition down at the Fall Fair in Mitchell, and it got first prize. I remember that part.
I'm sure that I was at the fair that year, and I saw this hanging up there, and I was just astonished. I think it's a beautiful memory. Incidentally, this is not your original cornet, is it?
No.
This was a second one. An interesting point, now in the Mitchell Legion Band, in the year 2015, all of us own our own instruments, but at that point in time, the instruments that were there belonged usually to the band itself. Is that the way you remember it, Harry?
A lot of them did. Some, I guess, they could afford bought their own, but most of them belonged to the band. Mm-hmm.
There were many bands in the area at that time. Right now, the Mitchell Legion Band is just about the only town band left in this community and in this geographic area. What were some of the other bands that you played with? You've already mentioned Brodigan Band.
Well, I played with the C4 Dashwood Band for about 10-15 years when I was able to. And I also played in the Milverton Band. I played with them for 35 years, the Milverton Legion Band. And I played in the Perth Regiment Band from about 1957 to 1960, so, in Stratford, Perth Regiment, and that's about it, maybe.
Well, you were a very valuable band member because, like, you never considered yourself a chief in the tribe of musicians, but you were always there as a faithful Indian brave, always doing your best to play. So I'm sure there were other bands that every once in a while would need somebody and they'd give you a call.
That happened a few times. I played in a couple of bands for maybe only once or twice. Tavistock Band was one I can remember. And I even played in the Burgess Band one time for one time. That's about it, I think.
When you were going out with your bands, I'd imagine that you depended a lot on Beatrice because somebody had to stay home with the kids.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, she never minded me going out to play. Somebody said one time maybe she was glad to get rid of me for a while. Anyways, she always was with me that way. Mm-hmm.
How many children did you have in your family?
Seven. We had 7 children.
How many of them are still involved in band work these days?
There's still 3 of them involved. The names.
Sure, tell us.
David is my oldest son. He still plays. He's been playing with the same band with me for over 50 years. And Karen, my daughter lives in Mitchell. Karen Wolfcamp now, she is. And Anna Cleland still plays, and she's lives back near Listle. The rest of them played for a little while, but they got interested in other things and didn't keep it up.
It's interesting in band work. Quite often the commitment comes from generation to generation to generation. So I'd imagine you probably have some grandchildren now that are playing as well. Let's talk for a few moments, Harry, about some of the characters that you've met in band work over the years. And somebody once said, you don't have to be crazy to be a musician, but it sure helps. And if you had to name a couple of characters that you've met over the years, nothing derogatory about these people, of course, but once you met them, you couldn't forget them. They had their ways. And who would be your first nomination for a memorable band character?
I just mentioned your name for one thing.
Me? I'm a character?
One time you were. Yeah. So that's one of those, Clare French. And Scotty Butler was another character. He always had some funny remarks to make. When you, like some of the other people, they'd make some remark when you're ready to play the horn, and that didn't go so good, you had to laugh.
And then you missed your cue.
Yeah, that's right on, yeah. And, I think a lot of them after I get finished here.
Well, I've got a list here, Harry, and I'm just going to run that list past you. One of our faithful, great drummers, Louis Morello.
Yeah, he was a character in his own way. He keep you interested in how long he was playing, with some of the jokes he would tell, things like that. Yeah. And
bless his heart, I remember Louis in particular because when I started over here in Mitchell, when I say over here, that's because at that particular point I was living in St. Mary's. In 1969, I became the leader of the Mitchell band, and Louis was at that particular point playing drums, but he also had a trombone. And it was difficult for me at that particular point in a young band under my direction to have everybody playing together at the same time in the same place in the music. So I kept telling people to watch their music. And I remember most often that people would look at their music, but they weren't reading it. And I'm thinking now along Louis' line. His intentions were great, and sometimes he'd miss a cue, but once again, he was looking at the music. Doc Toll.
Oh, and Doc Toll, yeah, he was quite the character. I forget how I got to meet him, but I first met him and asked me to come up to Blythe and play one time at a concert or a parade, I forget which it was. And then he was quite a character. And then I got into the Seaboard Dashwood band in the county. He led that band. He was a retired, well, he was a dentist, that's what he did. He used to tell some tall stories about pulling teeth. But I can remember he was quite a man. Mm-hmm.
Another band leader I know you remember well, this gentleman was the person who was responsible for getting me to play in bands in the first place. Pete Hintz from Broadhagen.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of good times with Pete, played in the Broadhagen band. He was an interesting character too. And lots of laughs and lots of jokes and stuff like that. Remember, it was good.
And while we're talking about Pete, how about the immortal Pete Stewart?
Oh yeah, Pete Stewart. Yeah. He, when the Mitchell Legion took the band over, we didn't have much money, so we had to have a leader. So Pete Stewart was a saxophone player. He played in dance bands for quite a few years. So they talked him into being our leader. So he done that, but we did some. I remember one time we went to a church parade for 11th of November, and there wasn't room upstairs for some of the band members, so we went downstairs in the basement, and Pete was telling a few stories, and we were doing a lot of laughing down there instead of listening to the service.
Maybe they heard you upstairs.
Well, probably did. I don't know. Yeah.
George Dewar.
Oh yeah, George Dewar. He was the drummer. Yeah, he was a real character too. Yeah.
It was the characters that made playing in bands so much fun. It really was. Johnny Brecker.
Oh, Johnny, yeah. Well, he was great. I remember the time when the Broadhagen band, we were standing with Johnny, we were standing waiting for the parade to get going. All of a sudden, Johnny started to go, and Johnny was smoked a pipe. So he was, I guess when he started to play, he had to have two hands to play clarinet. He stuffed the pipe in his pocket. Every once in a while, you see him whacking his pants. The first thing you know, smoke started coming out of his pants. His pants got on fire from the pipe. But he come back the next day with it all patched up and ready to go again the next time he played.
Norman Rock.
Yeah, Norman Rock, yes. He was quite he had some tall jokes too. And I can't tell some of them, but yeah.
You've mentioned this gentleman already, Pop Pauli. As far as I'm concerned, like Pop was one of the mainstays of the Mitchell band when he was with us, and even yet today, his surviving members of his family donate the Lloyd H. Pop Pauli Award to the most outstanding or most improved bandsman every year at our Christmas concerts. So, you know, today's musicians who enjoy band music need to know about some of these fellows that were responsible for keeping the band going over the years. You know, over those years, Harry, you had a lot of public appearances with the band. I'd like you to tell me about the parade in Auburn.
Oh, that's the time when we started out praying, and it was a nice day, wasn't it? All of a sudden it started.
Well, it was a bit threatening.
Yeah, I guess kind of threatening rain, and halfway down the parade, just poured rain. Well, what can you do when you're in the band marching? You had to keep on playing. I remember George Dewar, he would, every time he did on splash, splash, he'd holler. he got entertained us on the way down. We couldn't play much because it was raining too hard.
When was that time that we were, I think it was a fair parade over here in Mitchell, or was it an Old Boys? We just got on parade and the thunderstorm came.
Yes, the fall of I can't remember what time that was. I remember the time, yeah. And it thundered and lightning, I remember. You couldn't go anywhere except stay on the band and pretend you were playing or something.
Well, we were in the bandwagon. I remember that.
Yeah, I know.
And what I really remember was that we couldn't stop the bandwagon once the storm started because we couldn't get off. So we just kept on going, and there were very few people there. But I remember at the end of the parade, with all this thunder and lightning crashing around us with all our big trees, I remember finally stopping the bandwagon over at the Mitchell District Community Center, and our tuba player turned her tuba upside down, and you should have seen the water that came out of it. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right after the parade that day, I came home, and I'll tell you right now, I changed just inside the door. I did not have a dry stitch on me anywhere. Our shoes were filled with water. It was quite an experience. How about the time that you arrived in Listowel a couple of hours too early for the parade?
Oh yes, well, that was kind of fun. We got there too early, so somebody thought we should maybe go to the beer store and have something to drink, so we did that. And 2 hours sitting around not doing much, having a bit of a swish way. Some of us weren't in too good shape to parade. But then we went in the parade, I don't know, it must have sounded pretty awful, but we got through the parade, I know that. And one guy, Norman Rock, he has to take him out of the parade. He got that he couldn't walk. But
That isn't the day he sat on his trombone, is it?
I'm not sure.
And the trombone just broke right in half. But he came to the next rehearsal and he had it all
Taped
repaired with white doctor's tape.
Yeah.
They had it all taped up again. And there was one parade that we decided to take a little rest in the middle of the parade. I believe it was mild May.
Was that the time we went into, into the pub?
Yeah, well, we came up to this corner,
Yeah.
and it looked as if it was the end of the parade.
Yeah. So, yeah, so whoever was leading the band thought we'd
The color party actually was.
Time to quit, we just go and have a little, we're sitting there having our first little drink, and the parade was still going by, so we had to forget about our drinks and take off and finish the parade.
Yeah, the name Fred Calhoun, I think, sticks out in my mind because I kind of think he was.
He never been off done that job, but he did that day. He was leading.
Yeah, he was in the color party.
Yeah.
But I could tell when we stopped there because I could see that the parade was still going around the corner, and we thought it had stopped already, and that was the end of the parade. Anyway, it was fun. And we can't leave this segment, Harry, without talking a little bit about the band picnics, many of which were held at your place.
Oh yeah, so it's a good time to, sit around and get a jam session going and play half the afternoon, sometimes on the evening for a while. Lots of good times doing that. Yeah.
And it wasn't just band music, because at one point I think we had a harmonica band.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And you haven't heard anything, folks, until you've heard a harmonica band.
Yeah.
Well, those days seem to be in the past now. Mind you, the band still plays engagements, and we just don't seem to have the opportunities anymore for fun. We tend to be very serious when we go out now, and I sort of long for the good old days. One of the people that we have talked about in connection with band work here in Mitchell was Cliff Bushland. And it's always a struggle to keep a band going, especially finding new members to replace those who leave because of age or moving away from the community, etc. Tell us a little bit about how you feel Cliff Bushland contributed to the future of Mitchell Legion Band.
Well, he's done a great job of teaching beginners how to play, and that's for sure. And he was always quite interested in the band. He was a great trombone player himself, and he loved the band music.
I remember Cliff playing at a couple of concerts, playing solos. So you're right, he was a good trombone player.
Yeah,
And I've heard rumors that some of his classes had as many as 15 members in what was known then as the junior band.
Yes, that's right. He did have that for a few years, and when the Legion took the band over, they contacted Cliff, and he was quite willing to. He was good. He was a good man with with the beginners, with children, or not children, grown-ups, and he seems to know how to get them learn how to play.
That reminds me, Harry, what instruction did you personally receive on how to get a nice sound out of a cornet?
Well, I don't know. I don't think anybody just, all they had to do was put the mouthpiece up to your mouth and then you spit the hair off your tongue. That was one thing they used to say. That was the right way. But,
yeah, Pete Hintz used to say you had to spit a piece of tobacco off your, off your tongue.
I never had that problem, but I don't know. So it's a funny thing about playing. There's some people can play a horn and get a better tone than another person out of the same horn and do that. But there must be different ways of doing it or something other, different tones or different.
Yeah, it has to do with what musicians call the embouchure.
I guess it is. Yeah.
You know, all the muscles that are around this part of your face, because actually they're the ones that control the actual vibrations of the instrument.
Right.
And all the time that you were spending with the band, you still found time to sing in the church choir at Main Street United Church.
I did, yeah, sang for a lot of years in the church choir. For a few years I wasn't very regular when the family was smaller. The children had, sometimes one of them had to stay home and look after the kids, or the other went to church or something like that. But I wasn't as regular with the choir for a few years as I was with the band. The band I was always there, but it just seemed to work out better that way.
Well, there was always more fun in the band than there was in the church choir.
Well, I guess that's true.
And I know you well enough, Harry, to know what you prefer to do. Who was the first organist that you remember singing for at Main Street United Church?
Her name was Hazel Brandon. I'm pretty sure that was her maiden name, and she married a choir member from Mitchell named John Skinner. And so Hazel Skinner played the organ for her. But the person I remember, yeah.
When did Ernie Harley come into control there? Does 1947 ring a bell with you?
Oh, he did before the war, because he had to take time off to go into the army for a while, and earlier. So I imagine it'd be around 1940 or somewhere, 41 maybe. And he was there for 50 years. Yeah, but I enjoyed singing in the choir with him.
Well, he certainly was a dedicated organist, because I don't think there's ever been an organist at Main Street United who remained for so long.
No, he was there for 50 years.
What did they do while Ernie was away helping us win World War II?
They hired a lady that was a pretty good pianist or an organist from Mitchell. Her name was Hinks. I forget her first name.
Flora
Hinks, that's right, yeah. Yeah, she played the organ while he was away.
And there was a Mr. Mulheron, too.
Yeah, he was there before, between Hazel Skinner and Ernie before. He was there for about a year, if I remember right.
Were there any activities of the church choir at Main Street United Church that stand out in your memories as being outstanding?
We didn't do many jobs or whatever. We gave out of the choir, out of Mitchell really. I sang with a male quartet for a few years. We used to go away maybe in the evenings and sing at other churches. Asked to come.
As long as I've been here in Mitchell, band practice has been Tuesday night. I can't guarantee it was always Tuesday night, and church choirs are always Thursday night.
That's right.
And there is a certain amount of practice that you need to go through for a church choir experience as well.
That's for sure. Yeah, we always practice every Thursday. That was a must. Yeah.
And of course, the practices were held in the church.
But when we first started, we used to. They didn't practice with the organ because they didn't want to heat the upstairs church, so we had to practice down in one of the club rooms with the piano in the wintertime. That was our practice night there.
And the big service every year at that time was?
Flower and bird service. The whole church would be decorated with people would bring their birds from their homes, and the birds singing, and flowers all over the place, and there was standing room sometimes only, up in the gallery.
I've seen pictures of those flower and bird Sunday choirs.
Yeah.
You must have had about 100 people in the choir sometimes.
There were a lot of people there, boy, with the senior choir and the junior choir too, yeah. A lot of people.
You also played in the church orchestra.
Oh yes, I played there for over 30 years, I guess. And,
Not only that, you were part of the Dingalings.
I know.
Tell us about the Dingalings.
Oh, the bells.
Oh, the bells, that's what it is.
That must be what you're referring to, I don't know.
It is, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, oh, the bells, yeah. I played on the bells for a lot of years. The bell choir, I guess you'd call them. That was interesting. Just, it looked kind of simple to do. We really only had to play one or two bells, but you had to keep your eye on the music all the time because you had to play your bell when the right note come up.
Yes.
So that was the demanding part that I found was.
And once again, if you missed your cue,
Oh yeah.
not good.
Not good, no.
Harry, it's been great talking with you today. You know, band music and band experiences are really, really changing. How does playing in the band today compare to what it was in the old days?
Well, it's different now. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older. I notice they don't socialize after. We used to go out to have a great time, go after the praise, and maybe go into a hall someplace, and they'd ask us to play some more, and we'd entertain for the afternoon, have a good time like that. Now everybody seems in a hurry to get home and do things. And, yeah, different kind of entertainment, I guess they do.
I was thinking too, Harry, I totally agree with you. That's the way it was and the way it is now. When I was starting out in the Brottingham band, if the band had to play someplace, Dad would shut down all the farm operations and take off for the afternoon.
Right.
And that wasn't easy to do because Dad didn't work as part of a gang at the French place. We did all our own harvest, so you know, harvest at our place would stretch for 3 weeks. And now it seems you've got to get your harvest in 2 days. So it gets very difficult to field a band now. Tell me something, Harry, with the voice of wisdom from years of experience. What advice would you give to a young player now?
Well, I think maybe you start off, you're a little discouraged. You can't play as good as you think you'd like to play. I remember one master telling me, I said, I'm not playing as good as this. Maybe I mentioned a couple of days after you do you are now. That's somebody, but maybe I shouldn't be playing. Well, he said to me, he said, one thing about you, he says, you're always there. He said, the best player in the band don't show up. They're not much help to you. I never forgot that. So you don't have to be the best player. I never was the best player to belong to a group. And if you're interested, it's a good life. I enjoy it anyway.
I'll tell you something, Harry. You may not have always been the best player that was up there, but you were always there, and I certainly appreciated every engagement, every minute of being with you.
Thank you.
Do you want to know a little secret? It's not much of a secret. I still miss you in the band.
Well, yeah.
I could always count on making Harry laugh, and it just sort of lightened the whole atmosphere. And if everybody in a band feels good about being there, that's half the battle won.
See, I kind of laughed, Jerry, and smiled. in the right atmosphere.
Thanks, Harry, for this time together.
Okay, thank you.
All the best in your retirement.
Well, thanks a lot, yeah.